So welcome into episode 008. I got my buddy Taren here. Been friends for like 7 years. Also another fraternity brother showing up, showing some love, support. Just found out that he's listened to like every episode, so I'm pretty excited. Love the support. Thank you, man. Thank you for coming in.
Absolutely, Cameron. I really appreciate you having me here. So I guess I give myself a little introduction before we run into any topics. Again, my name's Taren Davis, 26 years old, and like Cameron said, we've known each other for about 7 years now. And it's kind of an interesting story on how we met, and we'll kind of dive into that in a little bit. But born and raised in Wellston, Ohio, so small town nobody's ever heard of. It's great because funny little topic is when I first met Cameron and Shay, we're all pretty close to the same area where we grew up. And actually, the funny thing about that is Shay from 006 played football against me in high school. So we knew each other without knowing each other before we even met in college. But we'll start off with talking about, where I come from and then where I am now. And to start that topic, I was born to a single parent back in 1995. My mother has done an excellent job in raising me. I can't thank her enough for everything that she's kind of taught me and still teaches me to this day because we have a really good relationship still. But I originally started off living with my grandparents. Like I said, my mom was a single mother. She found out she was pregnant with me when she was 19. So she had me when she was 20. It's a really easy number to remember too, because I'm like, all right, how old am I? Okay. Well, she just add 20 and that's how old my mom is. So that's like super, super awesome. And I don't have to like think about it too hard. So whenever she turns the big 5-0, I'll be able to make fun of her, but that means I'll be 30. So we're crossing that bridge in a couple years.
It'll be a great celebration.
I'm not excited. Well, it'll be a good year for birthdays, but anything other than that, I'm not looking forward to getting any older. So
I feel that.
But so she was raising me in my grandparents' house. So my grandparents really hold a really near and dear place in my heart because they were like a second set of parents. So I've got a lot of old school teaching. Kind of grew up the old school way. I know it's significantly different than how kids grow up these days, but a small town, really close family. So it's like a super impeccable way of growing up, and it's very consistent with a lot of the people that I grew up with a couple, caveats, differences and things like that. But I want to kind of talk about where, and I think it was around the age of 2, where things kind of changed for me in my personal life, especially with family. So my mother, she was dating, obviously. My biological father wasn't really ever in the picture, but she started dating, and she met a guy named Bruce, and Bruce and his family have been a very close family friend. And to me, honestly, I feel as though they are personally just family, because they've always, and to this day, they've always held their hearts out for me, and we've done stuff together. I've been to Christmases with them, Bruce and his parents, and obviously his wife and kids as well. They're a few years younger than me, so I kind of was growing up when they were growing up. So it's really unique to see, I guess kind of like the newer generation growing up with like a good Christian family that had their back, and still to this day do. And it's really funny to see, like, I'm not gonna name them, but the older one, he is probably as old as my little sister. So he's, I think, a 5-year, 6-year difference. So he had just graduated high school, and he's set to get engaged, and like watching all of that unfold, because I remember seeing him as a baby,
Wow.
I was like, holy crap, like this is insane. Like life moves so fast, but that's enough about that. So I still really feel a lot of love for that family, and we had just recently went out and got lunch together just to kind of catch up. It's been a couple years since I've actually done anything formally with them, so it was really nice to catch up with them. But obviously my mom and Bruce didn't work out, so kind of moved on to the next person, and that next person is who I call my father, or my dad. Whoever takes care of you while you're young, growing up, whoever creates that special bond with you, I think is actually who your father is. So they don't have to, they don't have to be your actual biological father or your mother in that case if it's the other way. But my dad was married to my mom for about 7 years, and ultimately that's who I remember growing up as my dad. That's who was always there, Monday through Friday, the weekends, stuff like that, and a lot of special memories from that period in time. And something that I want to talk about in a little bit as well is kind of how he helped get me on the right track after college and things like that. But him and my mom ended up ultimately getting a divorce, I think back in 2003, so it's been almost 20 years now. But obviously they still have a relationship with my brothers, I should just say my siblings, but my brothers and sister, and myself, of course. But that's kind of where we fall into my preteen / high school years. And let me just start off by saying I was not a very good child.
You grew up in the same area, right? You didn't move around.
No. So I've always been in Wellston, and I stayed in Wellston until after I graduated high school.
Yeah.
So, always had the small town mentality. I mean, it was a town of like 5,000 people. And jokingly, when I met Cam and Shay, they thought I was from Benton County, because I am relatively close to Benton County, but I lived in Jackson County.
It's a joke of Southern Ohio. Just Benton County is just trashy.
It is not a good area. It's rough, and it's like any rural, like country town in Ohio. I mean, poverty is a pretty big thing down there, and it's a little bit harder way to go with living life and growing up, and it can make and break you as a person. And luckily I got away from that area, and I kind of made something of myself. And then obviously, the added benefit of that is like I can always go back and look and see how classmates are doing or how family's doing, and I not necessarily compare myself, but just see like what the differences are. Like if I was still down in that area, how much would have changed.
See the evolution.
Yeah, with me personally, and in my career, and just all kinds of different things that would be completely different if I didn't ever get out of that area. So it's kind of like one of those things where you're like, oh man, like I was one of the lucky ones.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably feel the same way, because you also grew up in a small town in rural Ohio. So
yeah, I don't know. I'd say I'm pretty similar to most everyone in the world. Like, I don't care to talk to people that I went to high school with, right? Like, that's such a rough time in your life that, like, people say it's the best 4 years of your life. The bullshit. Bullshit.
Listen, I would have to agree with that statement. High school sucked. Period.
I hated it. I hate going to my hometown just because I don't want to run into anyone I know, because then I have to have that conversation, like, how you been, blah, 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 and I just don't want to. Like, if anyone's listening that I grew up with, sorry. But yeah, like, I don't know. Just growing up in a small town, everyone. Anyway, that's my rant.
Well, no, it's really funny that you say that, because I've had situations where, I'll stop in at the gas station or whatever, and someone that I grew up with is also there at the same time. And I've had those awkward conversations that it just seems like surface level, like, oh, hey, haven't seen you in a long time. How you been? Do we really care? You have to ask yourself that. Does the other person actually care? They probably don't.
Yeah.
It's probably
just because
haven't
thought of you.
No, and it's probably just because it's like, oh, hey, I saw you. I want to recognize that I've seen you, and then I'm going to move on. Like, listen, if you don't want to say anything, please don't. Like, I would prefer you not to.
Right.
There is a couple cases where, like, I've lost touch with people that I would consider friends, and it is nice seeing them and kind of talking to them, in a little more of an extended setting. Like, if you feel comfortable enough to sit at the gas station and talk to me for 5 or 10 minutes and give me life updates, fine, absolutely. But, like, if you're just going to ask me that time old question of, oh, hey, man, how you doing? No,
Yeah.
I'm good. We can we can say hey, recognize each other, just move
Yeah.
on.
There's so real quick just about me. There was a time that I saw some people I went to high school with at like some big something or other, and we like sat and caught up because we were like close friends in high school and we haven't seen each other in a while. And it ended up being like, hey, I'm gonna have some get together at my house. I'd love to have you come down and hang out. Like, that's cool. Yeah, loved both of those interactions. But if you like bullied me in high school,
Fuck off.
yeah, exactly. Like, I don't care if I see you in the gas station.
Yeah, and it's funny because I could kind of relate to that as well because I was always like the small, skinny kid in school, and I'm still pretty small. I'm just 6'2" now and still skinny, so that's detrimental to my mental health. We won't talk about that right now. But yeah, no, and I have the same thoughts and feelings. It's like, man, if you were kind of shitty to me in high school, like we're not friends, and we may have acted like friends back then, but honestly, like I've moved on so far in my life that like I just don't have time for I don't have time for you to necessarily like go out of your way to invite me to something that I probably don't have an interest in doing anyway.
Right. Like, I feel like in that 5 to 10 minutes, that short interaction that you potentially have with someone who like, bullied you in high school, you can tell. Like, oh, you haven't changed, or oh, you have changed. And if you haven't changed, that's the last interaction. Once again, I thought graduation was last, but
Well, we couldn't get that lucky.
right. But if they have changed, they seem like a good person. It could be good to like hang out with them again.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you on that. I think that if they've learned and grown as a person and kind of want to right their wrongs, and I will absolutely give you the opportunity to, but I'm not going to give it to you in a setting where we're out in public. Like, if you want to have that conversation with me, feel free to message me. Feel free to, search me on social media if we're not friends. Send me a message, whatever. Approach it that way, and then we can have a conversation. But if it's in a public setting at a gas station or wherever we may be, like, just don't. It's We won't have enough time to talk about what we want to talk about,
right?
And the feelings that we had from 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, like let's say, hey, hi, how you doing? Good, great. Love to catch up sometime. Let's grab a drink.
Exactly. And sometimes, and it's funny, sometimes that drink never comes. And
right.
I don't know how many times I've told people like, hey, like, let's go out and grab lunch together, or hey, let's go out and grab dinner together. And radio silence, and it's been 5 years. So it's like, all right, do you really mean that you want to go out and have lunch with me, or are you just saying that to like
you're just trying to be nice,
push that conversation over,
right?
Like, hey, okay, I'm leaving now, see you. But I think that's enough about that, because I could talk about that all night.
Right.
But I will say that that definitely holds a pretty big grip on me and how I grew up too. Is like, I thought I had friends, and I think this is like everybody's life experience. Once you leave high school and you leave the area that you grew up in, my mom always told me, she's like, hey, you're only going to have like one or two good friends when you leave high school. And I was like, whatever. I always blew it off, because I'm like, well, maybe you just didn't connect with them or whatever the case was. No, that's actually factual. I think that I know that I still talk to one person that I graduated high school with. And him and I regularly, we'll just go out to the bar or meet up and, go do something. Like, I think recently we just went to Pins in Easton, just as like a hangout, whatever, just catch up. And I kind of feel fortunate for that, because, him and I were really good friends, I think, starting in like 5th grade. And obviously we grew up together. So it was like it's really fun to see like where he's at in life. And then like, obviously, like on the flip side of that, I think he also enjoys seeing where I've come in life as well. So it's always good to have, that, couple, I would say probably, anywhere between 2 or 3 good friends that you still communicate with, on a, it doesn't even have to be on a daily basis. I mean,
right.
Ben and I communicate, once or twice every couple weeks, and then it's like we've been friends and we've talked, every day since then, because we just kind of built that relationship, that
right.
bond. So it's like, it's not weird at all. And it's so funny because that's how I realized that he was truly a friend. Is like, we can go, 3 months without talking and then pick up a conversation and talk about each other like we didn't miss a beat. And
Right.
it's like, what? What? You're like, what?
That's how you know a real friendship is
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
been created.
And, it's something that I've seen with Cameron as well. Like, I don't think we've hung out in probably at least the last 6 months that I can remember.
We hung out
I think the last time we hung out was in May.
Yeah.
So that's 7 months.
6
right?
months.
7 months, 6 months, somewhere
6
around
months.
there.
Wow.
So him and I went out to dinner before, shooting this episode, and we picked up conversations that I guess like other people that were not friends couldn't have.
Right.
So that's how and it just kind of reinforces that friendship.
Absolutely.
But anyways, to go back to finishing the high school, because I know we're going to do this quite a few times tonight. We're going to kind of run with the conversation, which is a good thing. I don't ever want it to be boring for anybody, and I definitely want to be able to expand on, kind of how I grew up. But so I hit high school, and it was kind of rough for me. Single parent, mom had just gotten divorced. A really key turning point in my life actually happened in 2003 when my dad divorced my mom. My aunt was actually killed in a motorcycle accident that same year, a few months prior, and it absolutely devastated the family. I mean, it was I think my mom was really, really close to her. We live like a block and a half away.
No, is this your mom's sister?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I guess I should have probably said that.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, so so Sandy and my mom were really, really close. I mean, like best friends. Outside of being sisters, they were truly best friends. They always hung out, always did stuff together. So seeing that my mom was the youngest of 4 kids, lose a sister, at a fairly young age. I mean, we're talking 2003 was just about 18 years ago. So subtract that from being 46, and that's really young to lose somebody that you hold so close to your heart. So that kind of changed a lot of things for myself, for my siblings, for my mom, for my grandparents, the entire family. And it really kind of opened my eyes. That was my real first experience with death. And it's at a fairly young age, but I was just old enough to understand what it meant. So I think that it really affected my outlook on life and death, and kind of like, I wouldn't say that it like steered me away from taking risks, because I absolutely take risks. But it also kind of like made me realize like, hey, life's short, and I want to do the things that I enjoy doing, because who knows, I may never get that opportunity again to do whatever that specific thing is.
And you were, 7 or 8 years old learning this type of lesson?
Let's see, 03 to 95, I was
8 years old?
Yeah, it would have been 8 years. Probably around 8 or 9, I think. Actually, it was right before I turned 9. It was in June. My birthday's in July. So, yeah, so that's a pretty young age to kind of understand what it means. And, obviously I don't think I had a full grasp, just because like it was my first experience. So like I didn't know how to feel emotionally. I didn't know how to feel mentally. But it kind of gave me, I guess, like the ground point, the foundation of understanding it truly as life goes on. So, Sandy was a huge part in the reason why I decided to make some life choices a couple years after high school, and we'll get to that. I just want to make sure that we finish out the high school years, because we're almost done. There's not too much exciting stuff, but that was just a really key point that I wanted to talk about, because it's still, I mean, we're talking 18 years ago. It still is a memory that I think about pretty often, pretty regularly. And it's kind of not in a bad light. It's just in more of like a remembrance, and then kind of like I just need to reinforce myself every once in a while and say, hey, this is the reason why I enjoy doing something. It's because I knew she enjoyed riding motorcycles. I knew she enjoyed living life to the fullest, to her ability. And that's kind of the way that I kind of have an outlook on life as well. So that was really a huge turning point in my life. So moving forward with that, I was kind of a shithead, because I had, all this emotional pent up feelings of, sadness, but anger, because, why would somebody do that? It was their fault, which, ultimately it was the other driver's fault. So, as a kid, I gave my mom and my great aunts a hard way to go at a young age, because I just didn't know how to like deal with it.
It's hard.
No,
It's
absolutely.
something extremely hard,
Absolutely.
being that young and trying to comprehend.
Yeah. So, my great aunts would babysit for me while my mom was at work, because they were retired. And I remember coming home from school. I think it was right around the time that I was 13, and my great aunt, who I think at the time was like in her mid 50s, probably at the time, she has some health issues, and I triggered one of those health issues because I was angry. I was playing a game, and I got upset, and I like picked up an oak chair and slammed it on the ground, which it's pretty loud noise that it created, and like it kind of set her off, and she had to leave, and like I just didn't understand like what happened. And then she obviously called my mom, and my mom came home from work, and like she kind of whooped my ass, and I deserved it. And I'm not saying I didn't deserve it, but
Yeah.
you
You also didn't know, did you?
no, I didn't.
Yeah.
But it was like, hindsight 2020.
Exactly.
Obviously I should have never reacted that way over a video game. And this is early video games. Like this is RuneScape, like on dial-up internet. So like the kids these days don't have that struggle.
Right.
They're like high-speed internet playing Call of Duty or whatever, or Fortnite. And it's like I'm sitting here playing a video game on the computer with dial-up internet, and I died in the game, and I lost stuff, and I got upset about it. And that triggered that reaction. So like I knew that I was like, oh well, I've got some mental issues. This is early for that. So
Angry kid.
just an angsty preteen going into teenage years. It was just a bad deal all the way around. But I kind of learned from that after a couple of times to get my ass whooped as a young teenager. And not in a bad way, it was never abusive.
Yeah, I was gonna say like no child abuse.
Yeah, no, it was never abusive. So we don't have to worry about that. I think the oh man, I'm trying to think of the word for it. The circumstances of that have been long gone. So nobody tried to press charges on my mom. She didn't actually abuse me. I'm just gonna make sure that's clear.
No one was abused.
Yeah,
just a kid
definitely
being a kid.
deserved to be disciplined. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
So moving forward with that, we got into the high school years, and I remember freshman year, and this is what I'm talking about when I say when I said earlier about getting bullied. I remember freshman year, walking in, it was a pretty terrifying moment, even in a small school. Like, just you don't know the people that are older than you, really. I mean, you've probably seen them maybe just in the hallways. But I remember like the first couple weeks of school, I was trying to unlock my locker. And if anyone remembers the old turnstile, the integrated lock.
I remember those.
Where it was like super janky, and like you had to get it perfect, and then like turn the knob and then hit the little lever to unlock it. Well, I was having issues, and I had 3 or 4 books in my hands. And I remember, I think it was a junior at the time, came over and slapped all of the books out of my hand. And I just remember feeling so defeated. Like, I literally cried. I was so upset because I was already having a hard time with the locker. I was still new, to the whole high school phase. Like,
Did you know this kid?
I grew up with his younger brother. So I knew him through very small interactions because we would always like play outside or we would do stuff like outside of the house because he was older, he was obviously off doing his own thing. So like I really only had maybe 2 or 3 interactions with him outside of like that day.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was like haha funny thing that I did this or if it was like I know you because you know my little brother and I'm gonna mess with you. But I was so upset. Like when I can't explain this enough. That's how I walked into high school. That's how I thought my entire high school like life was gonna be. Cause I was small. I think at the time I was like 5'4", 100 pounds. I was tiny. And this guy, in the eyes of a freshman in high school, this guy looked massive. Like,
right.
He was almost 6 foot tall. He was like 180 pounds. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, what's next? Am I gonna get stuffed in the locker? Is this like is this like Saving the Bell where you just get bullied and like is that real life? Luckily that never happened, but that introduced me to what I would consider bullying in high school. So I took that as a life lesson, and I'm the type of person that gets along with anybody. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter, your ethnicity, it doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of things that don't matter to me. And I enjoy having conversations with people from all walks of life. From being I'm just going to throw this out there, from being like super religious where, you follow strict religious guidelines to somebody that's been in prison. It just doesn't bother me. And I think that I kind of call myself a social chameleon because I can get along with just about anybody, with a few exceptions. I mean, you really have to, on the other side, you have to be willing to be open to that communication. But
right.
I made a lot of friends in high school, and I was friends with every group. I mean, I grew up in the era where people were in social groups. You had the popular kids. That was one group. You had like the emo kids. That was another group. You had like the not really popular, but didn't really fit in with any other groups, kind of in the middle. And like, I talked to everybody. And I was friends with everybody. I tried to be friends with literally everybody because I didn't want them to feel like, oh, he's a popular kid. I can't talk to him. I never had that, like...
Taren's too cool for me.
Yeah, I never had that ideology. And I don't understand how people can have that thought process. It just doesn't really make sense to me because nobody's better than anybody.
Yeah.
There's always somebody that's going to have something that you want, and they're going to have way more than you want. It's and I'll talk in like terms of money. Like, okay, sure, you're a millionaire, but somebody's a billionaire.
Yeah, the grass is always greener.
Always.
Right?
It always is.
Yeah.
But I never really understood that. So and I'm not saying that I went out of my way, so to speak, but more so of like, I knew that I wanted to be friends with these people because I didn't want them to feel like they were alone. Whether they were trying to fit in with the popular kids or they were in the emo group or whatever, like regardless of who you were, I wanted to at least let you know, like, you had somebody to lean on.
Yeah.
And to this day, I'm still the same way. I was that way in college, like, and sometimes I would go out of my way to make sure that I said something to somebody. Like, I know there's a particular instance in college that I'll talk about in a couple minutes that really kind of shines a light on that and the kind of person that I am. And I really have my mother to thank for that because she's the same way. She's not judgmental. And I think we all have somewhat of a judgmental factor in our life, whether it's, super small, there's certain things that kind of really like bug us, but, I've also seen the other side where you won't talk to a certain person because they have a tattoo, or you won't talk to a certain person because they dress a certain way. And I was never like that. And I'm glad because I've met some of the coolest people that I know that way. Because I don't have those thoughts or those feelings of like, oh, this guy looks weird because his hair's slicked back and I don't like that because he looks like a douchebag. But that's not the case. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. But so I really took that in stride in high school, and it really developed me as a person because I played sports. I played sports in middle school and in high school. I took a couple years off. I think my freshman and sophomore year of playing any sports. I originally grew up playing baseball, and I'm left-handed originally, but I didn't get taught how to write right-handed, so I'm technically ambidextrous. But I would pitch left-handed, and I would bat left or right-handed. I could switch. So like I thought baseball was really gonna be my sport growing up, but I also played football, and I played football all the way up until I think it was from my third or fourth grade year up to eighth grade, and then I took freshman and sophomore year off because I was afraid, being the small kid.
Right.
It's a lot different in
Got
competition.
those juniors and seniors staring down at you.
Oh man, they had like linemen that were like 280 pounds. Man, I was this little stick, a little short stick that was walking around. Like I don't want to get crushed. So I was afraid. I was afraid, but I kind of grew out of that my junior year and played again, junior and senior year, and ultimately like I sacrificed my health for football, and it's really unfortunate because I had a couple injuries, a couple concussions, one really bad concussion my senior year, and it actually affected me in school, and it really affected like how I treated people and how I reacted to certain situations, and it was so bad. There's actually a video out there that one of the parents took of the game, and you see where I get hit, and it doesn't look like a very hard hit, but I lowered my head, and essentially I have no memory from a couple plays before that all the way to 6 months after. There's like a 6 month period of time in my life that is a black hole that I just can't remember anything during.
Was this like helmet to helmet?
Yeah, it was helmet to helmet contact.
Okay.
So
what position did you play in football?
So that was actually during a JV game, so junior varsity game, and I was defensive end, or the equivalent of a tight end for offense.
Yeah.
But I was defensive end, so I had containment. I was there to make sure that nobody got on the outside because I was taller and I was one of the quicker kids on the team.
Right.
I sealed off the edge pretty quickly, and I wasn't afraid to hit. And they saw that in varsity games. Like there were dudes significantly larger than me that I would take hits from and still be okay. Like obviously, I was unfortunately lucky to lower my head on that play against the running back, but it's kind of one of those like lesson learned. Don't do that again. But,
right. And this was also before they implemented that like newer technology right now.
Yeah.
The newer technology where it compresses the helmet and pushes it outwards, right?
Yeah, I think
I don't know how it works. I'm not an expert.
There's
what I understand.
Yeah, so the pads in the new helmets, it's called MIPS technology. I don't know what it stands for, but if anyone's interested, they can search MIPS. It's MIPS. And it's in a lot of like motorcycle helmets and stuff now because they realized having a rigid helmet's great until you have a force act against it. So you have this giant solid helmet on your head. Well, your brain still can move within the helmet and in your skull, right, which causes the concussions when your brain bounces off of the skull base wall and causes inflammation, sometimes as bad as like brain bleeds and stuff like that. So I got fortunate enough to not have a brain bleed, but I did have some they call ventricle damage and artifacts against the skull base wall, which I found that out through the MRI after. It was the next day I went to the hospital and got an MRI. My mom took me, but it really affected me. My social skills really failed. I kind of retracted in school, retracted in my social life because I can't really even explain like the reasoning why. It was just like something like clicked in my head. Like whatever happened, it changed me, and at least for that next year. But it was really interesting because I remember in school I was always at the level of like collegiate academics, so I was taking some of the stuff to prep for college. I was in, at the time it was pre-calculus, which I know kids, in the newer age are in calculus by their junior year. But for us, like that was a big step, being in
Right.
pre-calculus and stuff like that. And I was doing fine up until that point. And then when that happened, it was in obviously like the fall semester. By the springtime, I had to disengage from that course, withdraw from that course, and go to it was called Math 12. It was just a basic like algebra course. It wasn't even as extrinsic as algebra was. But I struggled to maintain grades. I struggled to have like motivation to do schoolwork, struggled to have that social life. And it took, up until I think graduation in May before I finally felt like myself again, which is weird because it's like something so small could have that large of an effect.
Yeah, that hit caused the concussion and caused like all of the development that your brain was having during puberty, and then it just goes backwards.
Yeah. It like shot me back like 3 years. That's what I felt like.
That is crazy.
And, it wasn't my first one. So the first two that I got weren't bad. They were, oh, I got a headache, the bright lights bother my eyes, just like the normal, almost like stereotypical, like, oh, you got a concussion. But
Yeah.
this one really was the like, holy shit, what happened? And, having conversations with my doctor for my cognitive abilities, he was considering sending me to stroke specialists who work on, like fixing any cognitive development issues that you may have after, a brain trauma like that. So, for anyone that knows somebody that's been affected by a stroke or whatever, you understand like, hey, I saw a really big change, and my doctor almost sent me through that to help me regain some of the abilities that I lost during that time.
Wow.
Yeah. So luckily it didn't have to, we didn't have to go that far.
Yeah.
And it finally came back. But, I saw a lot of aggression, a lot of like unwarranted aggression in that time. Like, I remember having conversations with my mom a couple years after, and she was like, yeah, you would just be really mean for no reason. And like your reaction would be like way over the top. And, you changed how you talk to people. You changed, like socially altogether just changed.
So you like spill a glass of water on accident, you just lose your mind.
It. Yeah, but absolutely
Wow.
lose it. And, I never saw that, during the time. Like I never knew that. Like I didn't. Like
This was like during that like blacked out time period afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like I didn't know that I was reacting that way. Like I'm sure, there was a part of me that understood, but I couldn't physically change that at the time because it just like, I just didn't have like self-awareness. It's almost what it felt like. It was almost like I was living in someone else's body with no control.
Yeah. You're kind of like on autopilot.
Yeah, and it was like terrifying because like I would
Jeez.
never want to have that feeling. I would never want anyone to have that feeling. And I would assume that it was just compounding from the previous concussions that caused the issues.
Yeah.
But and I'm sure there's been studies since then, for the NFL in particular on head trauma and stuff like that have kind of shed some light. But it's like, what the heck? Like, there's guys that do this, every year for 10, 20 years, and you see the long-term effects, and it's terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
It's terrifying. So like, football was a really big part of my life. And by the time that senior year rolled around, I tried to quit, and they didn't want me to quit. The head coach at the time didn't want me to quit. He wanted me to stick through it. So I did. But it was something that I was looking forward to, like moving on to college to play college football, which is really the driving factor of why I chose Tiffin. I sent Tiffin some clips, some huddle clips of myself playing varsity and JV. And I remember it was Coach White at the time sent me an email back and said, hey, we've already filled up our scholarship roster for this year, but we would really love for you to come on and be a walk-on at Tiffin.
Really? I didn't know about this.
So, yeah. So that and their criminal justice program, I think at the time it was like the number 2 on the East Coast. I think the other one was like in Hartford, New York.
Some crazy prestigious school.
Super expensive, like $47,000 a year school.
Yeah.
Which Tiffin wasn't too far behind, but I didn't really have a desire to move out of state for school and be that separated away from family. I mean, Tiffin still, it was like a 3.5 hour drive away from home. So like on the weekend or whatever, if I wanted to, visit, I could drive down and spend the whole weekend. But so football was really the driver for Tiffin, and it kind of excited me to like move to the next step. But as I had conversations with a doctor, he is like, I'm gonna advise you not to do it. And if anyone knows anything about collegiate sports, you have to go through the clearinghouse. And he told me that he wouldn't clear me as my family doctor through the clearinghouse because they check for previous medical issues and stuff like that, because they don't they don't want anyone to accidentally die or have an incident where death could occur during a college sport. That's
right.
It's not good for the athlete, but it's also not good for the league either. So unfortunately, by the time that I made it to Tiffin, it just didn't really work out for me. I didn't get to play, but I decided after high school, and this was 15 days after my 18th birthday, I was going to join the military. So I took the inability to play college football and turned it into like, hey, all right, well, I need something to pay for school because Tiffin was expensive as a private school. So I joined the military. I was like, all right, we'll join the Ohio National Guard. So moving into that, it was kind of like not like a last minute decision, but it was like a kind of a at the moment decision.
Didn't really think a whole lot about it.
No, I didn't. And
Say, hey kids, you want to pay for school? And you said yes.
Yeah. So I took my ASVAB my senior year, and I scored, I think it was like a 72, which is the general score, which is not bad. It's not the highest, but it's not bad. And this was after having several concussions, having a loss of time and learning and things like that. Like there's a lot of things from high school I don't remember that I learned about, which is terrifying. But but it changed me, and I think ultimately like that's a part of who I am today. Is like, who knows if that didn't happen, how I would act or interact with anybody, or what I would think about myself. So I would also say that's a defining moment in my life, having a concussion that caused a 6-month plus retrograde. But so my dad was in the Ohio National Guard, and he's been in since I think he's getting ready to retire, so almost 30 years now. So at the time, we're talking 8 years ago now, and 2013 is when I graduated high school. So yeah, so 2013, he had been in for 20 plus years. And he kind of talked to me about it, and he's like, how do you plan on affording college? And I was like, I don't know, because we grew up in a small town. My mom didn't make a lot of money, and I had younger siblings that she still had to take care of. So I didn't have, money to fall back on. I couldn't, ask family for money because, well, one, the area doesn't pay well. And, even if you're out of job for 20, 30 years, like, you just don't have the money. Especially for a college, university that costs $30,000-$40,000 a year to go to. So I was like, I don't know. He's like, well, why don't you join the military? And I said, okay, well, I'll look into it. So originally I tried to join active duty Air Force, and my buddy, he was 2 years older than me. My buddy got in, and he's an EOD tech, so he's an explosive ordnance tech for the Air Force full time, and has been since obviously he had graduated high school. So I was really looking forward to joining the Air Force. Well, the recruiter that recruited him and the recruiter for our area was retiring the next year, and he wouldn't call me back. Like, I left him messages. Like, he was in Athens, which was about 35-minute drive from where I grew up. So I didn't want to just like drive there and go to the office and then nobody be there. So like, I kind of gave up on the whole Air Force thing, and I looked at the Ohio National Guard because it wasn't, it wasn't active duty, so I could stay, somewhat local. Which they lied and told me, oh, it's 1 week in a month, 2 weeks, in the summer. That's bullshit. Don't ever believe that. It's way more than that. They just try to tell you that because that's the old school way of thinking.
It's not as bad.
No, it's way worse than that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that though. We'll talk about that. But yeah, so I was like, okay, we'll join the Ohio National Guard. So I had turned 18, and I knew that I had to wait until I turned 18 because I knew my mom wouldn't co-sign for me. So 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, I go to the recruiting station. We had obviously had conversations with the recruiter beforehand, and they're like, okay, do you want to do this? And I said, sure, let's do it. So I signed the agreement that I would go through MEPS, which is it's the pre-medical like clearinghouse for the military. They just make sure that like, you don't have any disqualifying, medical issues or previous like medical history that would be considered disqualifying. So let me tell you one thing about that experience. I was told to lie about everything. The recruiter no longer is in the military. He's retired, so I will say this. But he told me to lie about everything. I'm allergic to eggs. Eggs is technically a disqualifying service medical issue. Don't know why. I have no clue why, but it is. It was, at least at the time. So, 8 years ago. It may have changed now. But I had what we consider asthma as a kid growing up, which didn't really affect me once I got into like the high school years. I still kind of every once in a while had issues like playing sports, but they told me to lie about that. They told me to lie about like, oh, have you ever drank underage? No. Well, of course we all did. I grew up in a freaking cornfield of a town. That's the only thing we could do to have fun. It's like party and drink alcohol. So lie about that. Like, oh, did you ever smoke marijuana? Nope. Lie about that. I was like, okay, great. This is awesome. So I'm just going to lie. And this is going to be the premise of how I joined the military, which isn't a different experience. There's a lot of people that were told the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like it's actually just really prominent.
It's kind of the normal, which is shitty. I mean, it's super shitty that you have to lie to even be cleared to join. Now, granted, like, yeah, if I had like serious medical issues, like being diabetic or something that could like actually kill me, I'm not saying that asthma couldn't, but it wasn't severe enough to where I needed like an inhaler on me at all times.
Right.
Because we know people like that. We know people that have issues where, they could walk a flight of stairs and they have to use a rescue inhaler. So that was never the issue. So it was like, okay, well, yeah, your whole premise is going to be based on lying, and you're going to sign this saying that you have no issues. And, obviously I have all that paperwork. But ultimately it never did affect me with like the food in the military. Yes, there's a lot of fake eggs, but there was always substitutes. They wouldn't just serve eggs because obviously you can't just serve eggs for breakfast because not everybody eats just eggs for breakfast.
Right.
But so yeah, there was, alternatives. So it made it easy for me. I think when I went into basic training, I ate every morning for breakfast, I ate biscuits and gravy. And they would switch it up, like a couple of days they would do like regular sausage, biscuits, and gravy. And then they would do like chipped beef in gravy, which was really weird because I'd never had chipped beef before. It's just like little small flakes of beef, but it's super salty. So like,
oh, it sounds awful.
Well, it wasn't bad because like you think, like, oh, I'm going to go to McDonald's. You put a little bit of salt and pepper in it to kind of like season the gravy.
Okay, yeah.
So it already had that flavor. So I was like, okay, well, this isn't bad. So I didn't have to like, add anything to it. But let me tell you this, I drank a lot of water when I would eat that. I had like 3 glasses of water.
Too much salt in the system.
Way too much. It that early. Because, you think in the military, we're probably eating breakfast around 6 a.m., 6:30 in the morning after we had just gotten done working out. So, of course, we're all starving, sweaty, and we want to eat.
Right.
So, the food in the military wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. I mean, honestly, I gained a lot of weight when I joined.
Really?
Yeah. So I think when I first signed the contract, they weighed me in at like 126 pounds, I think is what I weighed. And then by the time that I graduated basic, so this was July 31st. From July 31st, and I graduated basic, and I think it was like the last week in January. So was it 6 months? I gained 40 pounds.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Now I kind of question like what kind of steroids did they have in the food, because that's not natural. Like people can't gain that much weight naturally.
Right.
But I did. I weighed myself when I left. I weighed 166 pounds when I left basic training, which is crazy to me.
Yeah. And you're someone with like a super high metabolism. You can eat like 9 cheeseburgers in one sitting and won't gain a pound.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so that was great. That was a great experience. Like I was like, yes, this is sweet. So I went to basic training in Oklahoma. And it was during the winter time. It was really, really, really cold. So I figured, like, oh, it's close to Texas. It's gonna be warm. Lies. It was so cold. Like Ohio weather is cold in the winter, but it didn't have anything on Oklahoma. The wind,
really?
Yeah, because it's so flat out there.
There's
in the
nothing
plains,
there.
There's like not even the trees stop the wind.
Yeah.
Like it was freezing, and we got more snow that year in Oklahoma than Ohio did.
What?
Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, like what the hell? Like this is Oklahoma. This is South. We're in the southern states. Like, no, that's not the case. That wasn't the case. So I think a lot of that was, putting on a bunch of weight for the winter. Like, I don't know if like evolutionally, I think we've all changed away from that. But for some reason, like my body's like, nah, we're going to put on some weight for the winter. We're going to be like a bear. We're going to hibernate. Right. So, went through that. It was fine. I never had any issues in basic training. I got in trouble once. I didn't really grow facial hair at that age. I struggled to grow facial hair, and we were told we had to shave every day. Well, one time I didn't shave in the morning after PT and breakfast, and the drill sergeant, I didn't even remember his name, but he was not from the U.S. originally, and I think he was Southern Pacific, so like Asian descent.
Okay.
And he didn't speak like great English, but it was well enough. Obviously, you could understand him.
Right.
And he got in my face. He's like, "Hey, Private. Yes, Drill Sergeant. You shaved today? Yes, Drill Sergeant. You fucking lying to me? No, Drill Sergeant. I was lying through my ass because I was so afraid to get in trouble. Well, I should have just told him the truth. And at the end of that, so I had to do some push-ups, do some sit-ups. He kind of smoked me out a little bit, a little exercise, for lying. He made me write a 1,000-word essay on the importance of shaving my face. Mind you, I'm in basic training. I have no internet, no phone, no books.
You just have to make shit up.
I had to make this shit up. 1,000-word essay. Mind you, we start at like 5 in the mornings, wake up. From 5 a.m. until 10 p.m. at night, roughly, sometimes longer, sometimes a little shorter, we were doing stuff. So there was no in-between time of like, hey, let me sit down and write, a couple words. No, I had to do this in one day from 10 p.m. until I woke up at 5 a.m. I got no sleep that night. I think I made it to like 600 words. I ran out of steam. I was like... I couldn't complete the assignment. I said, here's what I have to turn into you the next day. And he took it and never said a word to me. Guarantee you he probably just threw it away. And that was like his form of punishment. But I was so stressed out. I was like, oh my God, bro. Like, what do I write about? Like, why is it important to shave my face? I don't know. I'm 18 years old. Like, I just started growing facial hair. What do you want me to do? Yeah, so like, all right, I talked about how professional standards in the military, blah, 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 but that didn't last very long. And then I started making shit up. I'm like, it's important because I'm a grown-up and I'm responsible, and this is why we do this. And I'm like, this is trash. Well, I need some references. Like, let me write a book report on this. But no, of course not.
I would just Bart Simpson that shit. Just read the same sentence like 100 times.
Listen, I thought about it, but then I was afraid. I was like, he's gonna smoke the shit out of me. I don't want to
Right,
do more
2,000
push-ups.
words next.
Yeah, right. Like you couldn't imagine if it would have been any more than 1,000. I couldn't barely write 600. So, I turned into him, and that was the last time I didn't shave in the morning. Like that was the last time that ever happened. Because I didn't want to do that again. Now, granted, when I finished basic training, I definitely like kind of took a lot of life lessons from that. Like, okay, structuring my life, not so much one to be told. Like, I don't like being told what to do, but I'll do it. Like, okay, got it. It's like the military. Like, that's the premise,
Right.
Somebody that's been in longer than me made the decision, so they're going to just tell me what to do. Fine. So I never had any issues, kind of like following the rules or whatever after that. But when I went to Arizona, so I went from Oklahoma to Arizona for individual training, advanced individual training, which was like the job school. So the job school I went for is intelligence, military intelligence or all source analyst, kind of like a conglomerate of the intelligence specialties. So like you have human, which was human interaction, where they actually went out and talked to people and gathered, information and intelligence from people. Then you have like signal intelligence, which is, its own little thing. You have OSINT, which is like spatial photography, essentially. So like you have these nice space imagery pictures of things that you need to like, hey, this is the location, these are the coordinates. You divulge the information from those. And then, just like even at the ground level, like guys that are on, their boots on the ground, they're in the village of doing, whatever mission that day is. And hey, this guy said that, there's a bomb maker that is in the village for, Al Qaeda or whatever. So we kind of took all those pieces from, the individual specialties and just kind of made one giant, what was called an intelligence summary. And then we would brief that to the command team. So my job was really interesting, and learning about it was very interesting, but it was like a college course. So imagine, 17 weeks, just over 4 months of a college course that was so fast paced. Like it was so fast paced so that if you failed a test, we had 4 main tests. If you failed one of them, they would recycle you all the way back to the beginning.
Jeez.
And you would have to redo it all over again. So, I learned a lot. A couple things that I found very interesting was doing like targeting packets. So like, hey, like this guy makes bombs. So you figure out what he looks like. You figure out what his patterns are. You figure out, who his relationships are with. And then you hand this stuff off over to the command team, and then the command team makes a decision on like, hey, let's capture this guy, or hey, like this guy, we're going to have to kill him, or whatever the case is. And that was the thing that I was most interested in. And it's kind of like dark. It's kind of like this dude's like fucked up. He's twisted in the head. Like he enjoyed
like
this
really,
part of it.
really studying people from like a far way.
Yeah. And you're gathering, like what I found most interesting about it is you're gathering information that they don't even know you're gathering on them. Which, kind of opens up the question for like, what happens in the US with, 3-letter agencies, but we're not going to go into that.
We're not going into that.
But, that's what we were doing overseas. And, obviously, I never deployed. I applied to, we had forms to request basically deployment. I applied to 3, 2 to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq. And I never got picked up for it. But that was kind of like I wanted to solidify my service to myself. Like that was my defining moment of like, if this actually counts, I want it to be, I want to at least do 1 deployment. And I don't want to go to Kuwait or Jordan or any of these other like supporting countries, because that's not what I thought as to being like my solidifying service. Like this is the one thing that I want to do, right?
Yeah. And this is just to like put it in perspective. This is like the I guess some of the quote unquote final years of the basically the result of 9/11
Yeah.
that you're working in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You grew up, you saw it on TV, and now you are in the military looking at being really involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that because we didn't even touch on this, but yeah, I remember being in school the day that 9/11 happened. We watched it in the classroom, which it's kind of messed up, looking back on that. Like, why would you show a bunch of kids, like kindergarten, first graders, like what's happening? Because we don't know what's going on. Like, we don't understand. Like, we see planes crash into a building, and we're like, what the hell? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And that terrified us. But like, yeah, I grew up remembering and seeing that, and then every year after that, the same stuff. They would replay the same recordings. We would do assemblies for 9/11. We would do assemblies for people that were from the area or close to the area where, if they were killed in action or they were injured in action, we would have veterans come and talk to us. Like, that was crazy to me. So, like, living in a small town, I don't know if it's the same for bigger towns, but, like, living in a small town, we had, like, that family basis of, like, everybody's family, which isn't really true, but we're going to pretend like it is. And we're going to do these assemblies, and it was very interesting when I grew up, coming back to those, because they do sometimes ask, like, alumni to, hey, come back, be a part of the ceremony if you can. I remember, I think it was my senior year, I remember volunteering to help the veterans around the school, because, like, we would do a breakfast for them and stuff like that. So, like, we would introduce them to ourselves. We would be, like, their personal, I guess, like, chauffeur around the school for that day. We'd make
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so, like, that was a really cool experience. But that was kind of like my first memories, and then that was kind of like the drive behind why I wanted to go overseas. And I'm not saying the length of time that we're over there was the right amount of time. I'm not saying what we did over there was good. I'm just saying that, for me personally, that's what I wanted to do, to just really make it feel like I actually did something.
Yeah.
Make it seem like to myself that I actually served my country. Because a lot of people will tell you, like, oh, thanks for your service. Well, I really don't feel like I did anything. I don't feel like I need to be thanked. You should thank the people that, went overseas, they got injured or they got killed, or, they saw shit that, nobody should really see. I mean, it's the atrocities of war. But, that's kind of why, we see issues with, 22 a day. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, veteran suicide is high because of the things that they saw or the things that they had to endure. And, I'm thankful that I didn't have that experience. I didn't have the negative side of it. But I'm also, I kind of hurt myself because I thought about it way too much. I'm like, oh man, I didn't get to go overseas. Like, I feel like I failed that part of my life, that I didn't get to close that door. Right. But ultimately, like, I stayed in for 7 years doing the same stuff. My original contract was for 6. So I did the 6. And then on the 7th year, I extended, and then ultimately I decided to get out, which took us up to 2020. So I got out in July of 2020. But there's a lot of things that happened between then and now, namely being when I got back from AIT, I went to college at Tiffin. So I still followed through with going to Tiffin because of their criminal justice program. It was difficult because I still had to do, the summer stuff, which no big deal in college. Like, I really wasn't working like a full-time job or anything at the time. So, like, I didn't have any issues with that. But if I had to leave, like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday for drill on a monthly basis, then, it took away from, the experience in college, whether it was like doing schoolwork or hanging out with friends, fraternity, things like that. I missed out on a lot of stuff because of that. And, I remember missing, I think, like 3 or 4 of my birthdays. Like, normally a birthday celebration, I just do small with my family. Mm-hmm. Because it's summertime, like, I've never had, one of those birthday months in school where
your friends are
around and, you can make plans or whatever, or your parents will make cookies or brownies or whatever, and they'll send them in with you to school. So I never got that experience. But I would just do like small get together with family, mom, go out to dinner or something like that. So there was like 3 or 4 years in a row where I just didn't celebrate my birthday because I was doing military stuff, which really sucked. And that kind of like made me sad. Definitely made me sad.
Yeah.
Because, you miss those connections. And especially if it's like a family tradition, it's kind of difficult to like change those. At least for me it was. And it may not be for everybody, but it made it difficult being, part-time military, going to school full-time, and then like trying to find the time to balance, family life, maintaining, friendships with people in college, and, being able to like go out and party if I wanted to party, or, do whatever, just even hang out. So, which to kind of caveat off of, was the reason why I kind of looked for fraternity. I kind of looked for that brotherhood in college, because I got a sense of that in the military. And obviously having younger siblings, 2 younger brothers, well, technically three younger brothers now, but 2 younger brothers at the time, I was like, well, I really want a sense of like having family away from family. So first year in college would have been the fall of 2014, and I was still new on campus, and my RA at the time was Ivan. And Ivan was the president of Phi Theta Pi at the time. And I got along really well with Ivan my freshman year, which technically, because I received college credits from the military for doing my individual training, I was in sophomore standing. So I was in the freshman dorms. He was the RA. Or he was actually the head RA.
Ivan was such a good dude.
He was. He still is. He still is.
He still is. Real quick, I just saw Ivan last week.
Did you?
I did. He's still a great person.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. If he's listening, you're obviously welcome to come and do this.
Absolutely. I would love to hear something from him.
Yeah.
But so to caveat on what you just said about that, he was the first face of Phi Theta Pi that I saw, and he didn't pressure me. He, hey, if you're looking, to be involved in something on campus, you're new here, you're a freshman.
It was a little sales pitchy.
No, not really though, because it was more like it wasn't all in one sitting.
Okay.
It was like, I first got to know him because we did like the icebreakers and like get to know the staff that would be there to help you. And then like I got along with them. So then like I kind of went out of my way to like have conversations with him. And then like I saw him wearing letters one day, and I'm like, I asked about it, and he's, oh yeah, I'm president of Phi Theta Pi. And then like it kind of just rolled into this giant snowball of like, all right, well, me asking more questions, like, what do you guys do? Give me some information, like I'm kind of interested. And then it kind of went from there. So it wasn't really sales pitchy. It was more of like, it was like a normal interaction. Like, you express somewhat of an interest in something, and then they, tell you a little bit. And then, if you have more, questions about it, then, come back and we'll revisit the topic. And then it came down to me sitting in his room one night, because he had a double by himself, perks of being the head RA. I remember sitting, I think it was on his futon, and we were talking about it. And I think that was like the defining moment of like, all right, I think I'm going to actually go hang out, because at this point I hadn't hung out with anyone else from the fraternity.
He's the only person.
Yeah, he was the only person that I met. So knowing where the house was and stuff like that, because he obviously told me, he, wasn't like trying to force me anything. He's like, hey, if this is what you're interested in, feel free. We have open houses coming up. Pledging is in the spring. So like, I got a lot of good information from him, and it wasn't like, I didn't feel like it was like a recruiting pitch. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, we need you, come join us today. Like, you know what I mean? It was more of just like having a good conversation with a good person.
Yeah.
So I remember that. And then obviously opening the door for looking at fraternities within Tiffin, one of the other presidents from Omega Psi Rho, I believe, he was also in the National Guard. He talked to me about joining them, and I'm like, oh, I was like, there's more than one fraternity on campus. I was like, okay. And that was a recruiting pitch. And no offense to him, like, they didn't have a lot of guys at the time, and I don't even know if they're still around. But it was more of like, hey, you should come to our open house. And I'm like, okay, like, no thanks. I'm good. But it was funny, like, seeing the two completely different interactions. And obviously I don't expect everybody to be the same, but that just kind of shows the light of who Ivan is, and that's a very small portion of his life. The fraternity was 3 or 4 years of his college experience, and I'm sure he still is involved somewhat, probably less regularly now since he doesn't live local anymore, but he was one of, I would say, the good ones, right? He was one of the ones that you look back and you remember, like, oh man, yeah, Ivan, he's such a great guy. And there's plenty of other brothers that I met and I have those memories of too. One in particular happens to be Julian, and Julian really solidified me wanting to join the fraternity. Julian and I met each other, I would say probably 1 or 2 months after, the final conversation with Ivan. It was after one of the open houses, and Julian and I clicked right away. Julian, I think he was originally from Cincinnati, and I was, from a small town not too far from Cincinnati, so we could connect, on a regional basis. We were kind of close
Southern Ohio.
Yeah, kind of close to the same, cities and stuff. And like, I was a Reds fan, and like, I had an interest in Cincinnati, and I remember the first time, and I don't know if I'm gonna like throw some shade, but the first time we ever partied together. And he got so drunk. I remember driving it's a gray Ford Escape.
I remember that car.
Driving it to Denny's at like 3 a.m. because, he was hammered, and he was like, let's go get some breakfast. And I'm like, all right. That was my first introduction to like drunk Denny's. I wasn't intoxicated, not that time, but it was like the first introduction. And I think I still have. So he took a video of me dipping marinara, cheese sticks and marinara, and I was like, just like looking down, and he was like, gimme. I was like, here, take one, you fucker.
I don't think I've seen that video.
It's so long ago, but I still have that. Like that was just like, that was who him and I were. We were always like, have a good time, always joking around. Like, it was such a good experience.
Just being goofy.
Being ourselves, being goofy, just living life, right? As teenagers, and I think him in his early 20s. I think he was like 20 or 21 at the time. I think he was 21 when I first met him. Yeah. So I was still 19. I had just turned 19. So that experience really solidified. And then meeting some of the other guys, Denzel, Chuck. If you ever listen to this, Chuck, my homie. So the family lineage, and I'll get to explaining how it kind of turned out. But Julian ended up being my grand big, and Charles, Logan, Xavier, Chuck, he was my big. So, and I think he only picked me because Julian made him.
Julian bullied it.
He did.
Chuck into it.
Yeah. I remember Chuck telling me that. He got mad at me one night. He's like, no, the only reason why I picked you is because Julian bitched about it too much. So I'm like, oh, that's typical. So we roll around to the first Halloween party that I remember, which was the toga party. I want to say that it was held with the Deltas, maybe, because I remember the Alphas were really upset that they partied with the Deltas at one point.
We did throw a off-campus party. It's not a normal fraternity party, right?
No,
it's it's like the American Legion or whatever, and they provide alcohol, and we have to card everyone, like all that stuff.
Yep.
Shit. I don't think that one wasn't a toga party. It was, but we did do a party with the Deltas. I remember the toga party. The toga party wasn't put on by us, and then the fraternity that put it on didn't even dress up in togas.
Oh, what?
The whole 5 fraternity dressed up in togas and just stole the show.
Oh my god! Of course, that's normally how it goes, right?
Yeah.
So it was. I was almost certain that it was the party with the Deltas. That was the first one. So I wasn't invited.
Not cool enough.
No, I wasn't cool enough. I didn't know anyone there. They asked me at the door, "Who do you know here?" And I don't know anyone. So I didn't go to that one, but I remember pre-gaming for the toga party at the house that I didn't go to. I didn't go to that party.
Right.
Because they carded at the door and they told me like, hey, they're not going to let you in. So I was like, oh, well, fine. Well, I'll just drink.
Just hang out.
Yeah, I'll drink some like cheap. It wasn't even Malibu. I didn't even know the name of the alcohol, but it was some kind of like cheap rum that Joanne was drinking. And oh my God, it was disgusting. But he was hammered. It was hilarious. Like it was so bad. I remember Ethan came up the stairs and yelled at us.
Oh man, I don't even know if I was there.
You weren't there. I think you were with
That's probably it.
your girlfriend at the time.
Yeah, either home or there.
I think you were with her at the time. And yeah, he was so upset because we were being so loud upstairs. So of course it's, Julian, myself, Denzel, and Chuck.
Some loud motherfuckers.
We had the loudest dudes in the house. And yeah, so of course Ethan was upset about it, which is funny because he was what we considered the house father. At the time.
Just trying to keep order in the place.
Yeah, it didn't work. Trust. I know for a fact. And that was outside looking in. So I couldn't imagine what it was on the inside.
It looked pretty bad.
So that was my introduction to kind of like the parties. Which, that's not defining of the fraternity at all. That was just like, hey, we all liked the same things. We all enjoyed, drinking and having a good time.
Yeah.
So,
but we did good things.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, that was what the spring semester was for. It was always, and November, but
yeah.
That was for prostate cancer. We always try to do something for it. And
we would always raise a shitload of money for prostate cancer. Even being on like a small campus, we still raised a shitload.
Yeah.
Like 10 grand every year.
Yeah. And it trickled down. I remember being the president and throwing, a last minute Movember thing together. And it kind of trickled down whenever I was the president. But we also lost a lot of people between those couple of years.
Yeah.
Just through graduation and, obviously like changes in campus culture. That was a big thing that really affected recruitment and getting, guys in. But, spring rolled around. I pledged. Was one of 5 that originally pledged. By the end of it, it was 3 weeks. Was it 3 weeks? I can't remember.
Yeah, pledging was... I think your pledging was only 2 weeks.
It was 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks for us, and the next year it was 3 weeks.
Yeah, because you were the first class after I joined.
Yes.
Yeah. So pledging was only 2 weeks long, and there was 5
of us.
5 of you.
By the end of week 1, which wasn't hard, week 1 was easy. There was 3 of us. And I'm like, well, this isn't going to turn out good. The first day of the second week, the other guy quit. And I'm like, oh, my God. So my pledge brother and I, Rob, who actually was what's the term for it? He was legacy.
Yeah, he's a legacy.
He was legacy. So his
dad's in the fraternity.
And it was just him and I. We were the last 2 guys. We were just like, oh shit, like.
And you're doing pledging in a house of like 15 dudes all staring at you. Yeah. And both of you guys are scrawny, and everyone else, besides me, is like just jacked
you and
dudes.
Ethan. Yeah, you and Ethan were like the 2 smallest dudes in the house.
Yeah. And everyone's just jacked, like goes to the gym, works out, whatever.
I'm like, oh my God, like I was terrified. It was a really good experience. So that is one of the times where if I could relive a moment in time, it would, and it sounds really corny, but I would relive like that last week of pledging. Yeah. Because that's when I really got to know, guys that I hadn't interfaced with before. That's when I really got to know who they were, and at a deeper level, not just like surface level. Oh, I'm majoring in this, and this is what I enjoy doing. No, it was like personal things that we had to ask and learn about each other, and I think that really was like the defining moment of like, yeah, I'm gonna go through this no matter what, like good or bad. It doesn't matter to me. And that is something that I would probably relive again because it was such a good and unique experience for me to know that like I'm not the only one that had struggles growing up. Like everybody has their own set of struggles. So I could relate, and I'm like, oh my God, like that sounds so similar to what I went through. And then you kind of build this special connection with somebody that you've known for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a couple months, like,
Yeah.
and then you can always rely on them. You know, they'll always have your back, or they'll be able to at least provide something to you if you ever were in need. And, you know, I've seen this because we've had conversations with guys that I've met through fraternity, and even guys that I hadn't met until like alumni events, where they would go out of their way to do something to help, you know, one person or the greater good. And like that experience I would have never gotten through sports. I would have never gotten through, you know, like different clubs and things like that, you know, just like at surface level, you know, all we have one common, you know, denominator that we can all relate to. No, this was on multiple levels, from surface to, you know, even at like the home life, how we grew up, things like that.
Absolutely. And like back to the thing that you said, you'd relive it. Like I feel like pretty much all of us would relive it. There'd maybe be like 1 or 2 people who wouldn't.
There's like 3 that I can account for.
But yeah. And like even it's crazy to go off to a couple of points that you mentioned. Like I've started this journey here of this podcast, and everyone who showed up, almost everyone, has been fraternity brothers.
Yeah.
And everyone's here to support and like wants to tell their story. Even, you know, 5 years after I graduated, and like, you know, meeting them whenever I was in school, and then some people I haven't talked to in 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And they're still like, yo, let me come in, like hang out with you and do this podcast. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
I know we'll probably get hate from people whenever they listen to this and whatever, but it's just such a different dynamic that our fraternity has than anyone else.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's not a knock on anybody else. It's not a knock on any other fraternity. It's just like the time that we went in, I think we all bonded really well. We were all very similar, you know, even down to like mannerisms, even down to like just interests in general. So it's not a knock on any other fraternity. It's not a knock on anyone that's that wasn't in a fraternity either.
Right.
You know, you can still have those shared experiences. It'll just be at a different level, which is fine, you know. And some people, you know, this is the stereotype. You had to pay for your friends. Well, honestly, it was like $50.
It was dirt cheap.
It was dirt cheap. Now, go to a bigger school, you know, it's $500 for a semester or whatever.
Right, at minimum.
But for us, that's not what we based our premises on. It was never about the money.
Right.
It was about the shared experience. It was about, you know, having somebody that you could consider yourself as, you know, a brother. And then even for the alphas, you know, our sister sorority, it was having a sister. Like if I needed, you know, help with a female in my life at the time in college, like I could always rely on a sister to give me advice. Like, you know, dating advice, or, hey, like I did this and they got upset, and we would always have somebody to like fall back on.
I need the girl logic.
Yeah, because we as guys, we're dumb when it comes to relationships and don't understand how women think, and you know, I don't think we'll ever will, but you know, it was always nice having that like group of friends, regardless, brothers or sisters. Like it was always nice having that set group of friends, and you didn't have to interface with them every day.
Right.
We would do events together. We would do, you know, small get-togethers, parties, things like that together. But like, if I didn't want to talk to somebody for a week, I could not talk to them and then turn around and be like, hey, what are you doing? Let's go hang out. You know, that's great. Like that to me was like, it was so nice to have somebody that we considered family away from home, because like, you know, granted I wasn't that far, but there were people from out of state that came and joined the fraternity, and they had family, you know, states away from where they actually grew up.
Right.
So that was always nice for me, at least in my personal opinion, because I know some guys probably don't have that same thought. You know, I could think of a couple that really disengaged, but you know, hey, if it's not right for you, it's not right for you.
Right.
So, but to move on and move forward with that, really, so pledging was a good experience. I got to know a lot about, you know, my pledge brother. I got to know a lot about the brothers that were already in the fraternity. And it it made me realize like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted. This is exactly why I considered joining in the first place. So as time moved forward, I really developed, personal relationships with each individual just outside of the fraternity. And like we would go and hang out. We would go, oh, let's go to the bar. Let's go to do this. And, there'd be a group of us that go to the bar and we'd get drunk and we would walk back from the bar and we'd have a great time doing it. Like it was phenomenal. And I think it was right after that spring semester, we lost a couple guys to graduation. So returning back into the fall, we all kind of knew like, oh man, it's not going to be the same. We're going to miss certain individuals.
Oh, this is when we lost like the big class of people.
There was like big class.
Yeah. And I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but our fraternity size is like 15.
Yeah. So we added 2 at this pledge class.
Yeah. And the graduation class was like 10 people leaving.
Yeah. So we really halved our numbers insanely quick. I mean, it was within 6 months.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that those guys got to graduate and move on and move forward with their life. But it really was like kind of like a hole. It was kind of a hole in my heart. I was like, damn.
Yeah, we missed them.
I miss this. Like, I miss going out to Denny's at 3 a.m, hammered drunk off my ass, eating some shitty Denny's food so I can regret it in the next day. But it was cool because some of those guys did eventually come back for alumni events or they came back randomly. And, one of those guys was Josh Franklin, who was also in my family line. He was Julian's big, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
So
I'm trying to get him in here.
Yeah. So he's a character. He was a great dude. Still a great dude. He's off on his own venture right now. He seems to be doing well. Always keep up with him on social media. Chat with him a couple times. But he would be one of those guys that dropped in randomly. Would not say a word. You'd walk out the back door of the house, and we had a parking lot attached to the house, and he would be there, like walking into the house. You'd be like, "What the hell are you doing here?" Like unannounced, never would say a word. Like, I just stopped in.
Random Thursday at like 4:00.
Yeah, we're going to get dinner at the cafeteria, and he's like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" We're like, "Oh shit, Frank, what are you doing, bro?" And he's big. Like this dude's massive. Like
he's a big dude.
I was terrified of him. Because he was there, I think 1 or 2 nights during pledging, when I pledged, and he's
got big voice.
Big voice. He's a big guy in general, like super strong, and he terrified me. I was like, oh my god, he's gonna eat me. I'm scared. Love him to death. Great guy. But yeah, he was just that type of person. He would pop in and say hey, he'd hang out for like 30 minutes, and then he'd be gone for 3 or 4 months. And he'd do it all over again. Mm-hmm. But that was a really funny experience. So I did want to bring this up. So Shay from 006 said that Cameron was a very large part in the reason why he pledged.
Yeah, you did say that.
That may be true, but I remember particularly hanging out with Brad and Shay in the sophomore dorms. And I would talk about the fraternity. And Shay was always like, I don't know, like, probably not. And then, like, I got Brad really interested in it. And Brad and him hung out quite often because they were friends. And they lived in the same dorm, same level, stuff like that.
Right.
So they would hang out pretty often. And I think we finally talked Shay into at least giving a second thought. And I think this is where, like, the whole going in the class together with you and having, some more serious conversations with somebody that was actually a part of the organization, I think that kind of, like, led him to the final decision. But I think I played a big part in that as well.
Yeah, it wasn't all me, like Shay said. And I know he's going to text me right after he hears this.
And I'm so happy.
Motherfucker.
I'm so happy. But I had to call him out because I listened to it. I was like, wait a minute. That's not all of the truth. Listen, we had conversations. I remember playing, I think it was NHL with Brad, and Shay wouldn't play, but he would like sit in there and we would chat, and I would just keep bullying him about it. Like, you should really do it, bro. Like, come on, man. Like, what's it gonna hurt? And
some real peer pressure tactics.
Absolutely. I was the sales guy. I was the sales guy when it came to recruiting. And
come on, man, just one hit of the fraternity,
just one hit, man.
You'll
never want to live without it. It's horrible to think about, but and it was for the best because obviously everybody that we brought into the fraternity had a very similar mindset. We enjoyed doing the same things. Like, it wasn't just like a sales pitch. It was like, hey, I recognize you as a good person, and I want you to be a part of a group of other good people because we do good things. We do good charity work. We do good events, which we'll talk about one of the ones that I kind of helped create with the Deltas. I was a little part of it. It's really kind of became a big thing. Now, but we'll talk about that. So like, knowing that we do all these good things, and like Shay grew up in the same area as I did, you know, we were like 30-40 minutes away from each other, unbeknownst to us. Like, we knew each other before we knew each other, knew of each other, at least played against each other in high school football. And it was kind of like the funny moment of like, hey, where did you grow up? Oh, I just grew up in Chillicothe. I was like, no shit. I was like, I grew up in Wallaston. He was like, no shit. He was like, well, I actually grew up going to St. Trace. And I'm like, no way. We played you guys every year for like the Jamboree game. So it was like the first game of the season, but it was like preseason still. It was kind of like a scrimmage, a live scrimmage. And it was like, oh my God, like we met each other without even knowing we met each other.
Right.
Like, this world is so small. Like, holy shit. And I think we had the same realization too, like you and I, Cameron, of like, oh, you're from there? Oh, shit. Like, no way. I played football against you guys like back in the day. Like, holy shit. Had no idea. So it was really funny kind of like having those conversations and getting to know each other. At Shay in particular, we had those conversations multiple times, which leads me into the whole Vinton County original VCO. That was their way of...
There's a trifecta of where all three of us live. It's in like inside the triangle is Vinton County, and we all grew up outside the shitty area of Southern Ohio. It's just a joke.
And they would bully me for hours on end because, of course, like I couldn't let it go. I would get upset and be like, "You motherfuckers! I'm not from Vinton County. Like, don't ever."
It was so funny.
But so like it ultimately like transpired to like our traditional like paddles we do for like the big and littles. I picked Brad as my little, and he put BCO on my paddle, and
I
still have that paddle. I haven't painted over it yet, Brad, if you're listening. It's still hanging on my wall in my office, and I hate you. I want you to know that. With all the love in the world, I hate you for doing that. But
and I love that you did it and really made it almost permanent on a paddle. It means a lot to me, Brad.
Listen, if you weren't bigger than me, I would have fought you, but you're way too big for me to fight, so I'm not even gonna try. I was so upset when I got the paddle. I was like, you motherfucker, why did you do that to me?
Like, thanks, I hate it.
Yep, this is gonna be the worst one that I receive. But no, all jokes aside, you know, it does still hold a pretty big special part of my memories of college and college life and the fraternity. You know, I do still have those hanging up in my wall in my office, and they'll always be there. Sorry, shout out to Brad. Thanks for making me a paddle. I never did finishers. I think I panned the sides, and that was it.
Hey, do you see that one sitting in the corner?
I do. Who's that one for?
It's for Shay.
Oh.
I
Shay.
painted that. I painted that in 2017.
Listen.
And he said, as long as I get it before I get married. Well, he got married last year.
Yeah. Oops.
I mean, you can have it.
It's unpainted. Well, it's painted, but it's not
You just
finished.
imagine what's on it. It's one of those abstract pieces.
It's one of the ones where you can't tell people what it really means.
Exactly.
Now, granted, I still have the one paddle that I broke that I was going to give to Brad, but that was the one that I only painted the sides on. And I'm considering, I actually did pull out of my closet it would have been like a year ago. And I was going to sit down and I was going to paint it finally. And then I realized that I didn't have any red or black paint. I had gold, and that was it. And I'm like, I can't finish this.
Time to go to the craft store.
Where? I live in Pittsburgh, remember?
Yeah, it's true.
I actually live in Pataskala. But Cameron thinks a 30-minute drive to Pataskala is Pittsburgh, so...
I still make fun of you for where you live.
Nobody knows where Pataskala is. You just tell them outside of Columbus, and they're like, oh, okay. Well, great. That's great. So I get bullied for living in Pataskla. Thanks, Cameron. Appreciate
Hey,
that.
man, we're homies. I gotta mess with you.
No, you bullied me. I'm gonna cry now.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, so jumping back into like fraternity stuff, in college in general, I really didn't like school. I kind of messed around a lot in the 3.5 years that I was there. 3 years on campus, and then I did half a year online to finish my degree. But I really did not enjoy going to class. That was like super detrimental to my social life, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't do it. I had a 3.0 GPA. I think I finished with a 3.0, but I don't know how many classes I missed in the 3 years. Like, I just didn't show up. I'm like, I'm not going to go to class today. Which ultimately I ended up getting kicked out of a class because I missed 6 days, 6 classes, which is a large portion. I mean, if you think about it, if you're only in there for, 15 weeks to get 30 classes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost 30%. You know what I mean?
Quite a bit.
So I'm like, well, I got kicked out of that one. So they gave me a withdrawal fail. It's like, great, thanks. I gotta retake this class again next semester because it was a requirement for my degree. Thanks, doctor. If you're listening to this, thank you for that. I was gonna fail anyway.
You just had fun with it.
Yes, I did. And that was my premise of college. Is like, I just wanted to have a good time. I wanted to enjoy my time on campus. I enjoy friendships that I made. Enjoy almost the stereotypical like college experience. Like, I want to go get drunk on a Friday night, and then on Saturday morning I'm gonna wake up and go get breakfast at some shitty diner or Denny's or wherever with the group of friends. And I made sure to live that way. But on the other side of the hand, we're talking about doing like charity events and things to raise awareness and money for different charities. I was involved in planning I think it's, what do they call it? It's the Delta Gala.
I'll be honest, I don't even remember.
So it's
some sort of gala.
It's a gala, so it's like a Night to Remember gala, and it's based behind like cancer awareness, different types of cancers and things like that. And I helped, I kind of helped develop it, kind of help like plan and give supporting ideas and things like that. I wouldn't say that I was a large part. It was just, I played a very small role when I became the president for Phi Theta Pi, but it was something that I knew that I wanted the fraternity to be involved in, whether it was like just help set up or be a part in like the speaking portions or be a part of like the planning, whatever the case was. And I really, really kind of went on board with that and drove the show home. The first year that we did it, it was great. I mean, I think we had maybe a couple tables that weren't full of people. This was open to the community of Tiffin. This was open to the college students, the faculty. Everybody was invited. It was, open door policy. Dinner was served, catered through the Wall Street Diner, which was through the university. And then, we would do like silent auctions, things like that, gift baskets from local businesses and stuff like that. They would donate and then take that money and then use it for whatever particular, cancer, research or awareness for that year. And I'm not sure if it's changed any or not. This has been quite a few years since I went, but the second year I decided that I wanted to speak, and I gave it was about a 10-minute speech about my mother's experience. My mother was diagnosed a few years back with breast cancer. Luckily, they found it and diagnosed it at what they call like 0, so at the very beginning stages. And this is, I think, about 6 or 7 years ago now. So right around the time that I was in college, I think it was after my first year, the summer, when she was diagnosed originally, and then had surgery. She had a double mastectomy, so she did full removal and then reconstruction to reduce the chances of it coming back. And then I think they removed a couple lymph nodes as well. So it was really a dark time in my life because, obviously cancer, you never know like what's going to happen. You don't know how severe it is. You don't know if it's going to come back. You don't know if it's going to spread. You don't know, there's a lot of factors you don't know. But luckily, she was able to get in with the James, which is OSU's huge cancer, medical
One of the
facility.
best.
It's one of the best in the nation, and everything went great and smooth through surgery. Still, I wouldn't consider remission to be the correct term because she was never on chemo. She never had to do the extensive reduction and things like that. But she does still take medicine to help reduce some of the issues, like without having like lymph nodes and stuff, some hormonal imbalance things and stuff like that. So she's better, obviously, but there's always that worry of like, okay, what happens if it comes back? What if it comes up in a new spot? Things like that. So the gala held a really, really close. I don't even know the word to explain that, but I held it really close to my heart. So the second year that we did it, I decided that I wanted to speak about my experience with it because, as a young student, as a young person, as a young, brother, son, grandson, I wanted to share my experience with anyone that could relate. And at our level, we had, quite a few older people that had either went through it themselves or like their husbands or their wives or their family member. So they would speak about that. So I wanted to be able to connect to the audience of like, hey, I'm 20, you're 20. This is what happened. This is kind of my experience. And, if they could relate to it, great. If they couldn't, even better, because obviously it didn't affect their family or it didn't affect them. But just to give them like the insight of like, hey, you may not be the only one going through this, even though it may be silent. Like, you now know someone that you can reach out to and be like, hey, can you help me out? I'm just drained. I've got a lot of stress on my plate. I know that you've went through something similar. Can I reach out and can we have conversations about it? And, can we talk about feelings and things like that? So I wanted to make sure that I opened that door to any of my peers in school. And from there, I mean, it's really kind of ran. I mean, I think did they just do it again this year? I think they just had it, or they're getting ready to do it again this year.
I think they did do it this year. I haven't had contact with anyone on campus for a while.
Me either.
I hope they still do it. I'm pretty sure they still do.
Yeah.
I don't know, since COVID happened.
Yeah.
All this was BC, so I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, and that was another thing too, is like if the new guys for the fraternity are listening and they're not involved, please re-involve yourself as much as possible. It's a great cause. The money's used towards charity. 100% of the proceeds go towards charity. So it's something that I think as an individual you should want to do, but as a fraternity we need to do this.
Yeah.
Because that's one of our principles of the founding fathers of the fraternity is like good welfare for everybody, not just the fraternity.
Right.
The fraternity is just a group of people that share the same outlook.
Yep. Got to give back.
Absolutely.
Give to people struggling.
Absolutely. And even if they're not struggling, be able to support them if they ever come into a time where they are struggling.
Right.
So, but I think that kind of sums up, the experience with the gala and the fraternity things. And, we struggled, once my second or third year, we struggled with, more members graduating. So it was down to, I think, three actives, before we got Shay and Brad.
There was 4 of us.
4 of us?
Yeah.
So
there was us 3. Oh, there was 5. There was us 3. 1, Chuck was on his internship, so he wasn't around. And then we had another one older.
Yeah. So 5 of us, and we were really struggling for numbers at this point because we're like, oh man, like, what are we gonna do? Like, we really don't want this to die out because obviously, like, it's difficult because college cultures really turn around on fraternity groups, and there's a few individual fraternities around the country that have kind of been the cause of this, like, whether it's deaths during pledging or hazing or
drugs,
them saying things in videos that
saying nasty shit
doesn't support what the actual fraternities stand for. Like, that's the reason why people have such a bad outlook on fraternities on campus. But with us, we never had that issue. We've never had an issue that, so to speak, defines us, but it's not really defining us. Like, that was a moment in time that like something bad happened. So we really struggled to find new guys, and luckily Shay and Brad were in it for the long haul. They actually pledged, and they both crossed. I'm trying to think if there was anyone else. Was it Mason was in their class?
Mason, and then other Brad.
And then, yeah, Brad Snyder as well. So we had 4 guys join. So we were up to 9.
Yeah.
And then 3 more graduated. But, you know, we really created a good bond with the new guys. And they were able to drive it home after I had graduated to get new people in. We had a pretty decent pledge class. I think it was a year after that with some of the new guys, Kyle, Blaine,
Yeah, theirs was
Bane.
like 8 people.
Yeah, so we had pretty good pledging class after that. And I'm not really sure because I don't follow it as much as I did back when I was still involved with the on-campus stuff. But I know that we just had another pretty decent pledge class this last year, and I'm not sure what recruiting looks like this year with COVID. It's been very difficult for social organizations altogether on campus just because of the restrictions in place. But I really do hope that they continue the lineage. I mean, it's almost over 100-year-old fraternity now.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Almost there. So
can't die.
Yeah. So,
can't die yet.
No. And I think there were talks about adding another fraternity. So we were originally international with a ton of different, fraternities, but a lot of those schools died out. So we would lose, those fraternities, those chapters. And ultimately, like, it disconnected a lot of members. But we're rebuilding. We're still rebuilding. We've been rebuilding for like the last 10 years. We've got a good, social media, private group for us, so that way we can all connect. And I know they're always adding members from freaking graduated in 89, welcome, whoever. And it's like, holy shit, like, how did you find this person?
Yeah, it's always cool to see, like, someone post, hey, so-and-so from pledge class, whatever, pre-90s is, like, found me on Facebook and wanted to see what everyone was up to. Yeah. So welcome them to the group. And it's like, what? Yeah. How do you just find people? I mean, we're in the internet. We're in the age of the internet. So
absolutely. And that's one thing too. It's like, I didn't grow up with it. Like I grew up with a flip phone and I had dial-up internet. So like, really, you weren't actually using the internet like we do now. Like,
yeah,
you're not really Googling a whole lot of stuff. Like, that just wasn't, that wasn't around when I was growing up.
As like a weird side note on this topic, I was looking at something the other day that us growing up within like I don't know, I think it's like a 6-year span in those 90s years, that we're the last generation of people growing up without like the internet age.
Yeah.
We still remember like playing outside and not being on the internet.
Yeah,
it's very weird.
The sticks, we'd play with sticks and they'd be swords. Like, that's the level of like, it's almost like caveman status to what we are now. Like, really, I mean, honestly, like, you have toddlers that are like better with iPads than I am.
Yeah.
And it's just like, holy crap, dude. Like, what? Like, this is insane. And it's not, I wouldn't consider it a bad thing. It can be if you use it for overstimulation. I mean, we could talk about that topic for 2 hours in itself.
Right.
The negative side effects of social media and what it's kind of done to the culture, but that's just something that I don't even want to get into.
It's a completely different topic.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, and it's defining for a lot of people in the new age, but for us, like, coming into it, I think I had a MySpace in like 6th grade. So that was like my first social media platform. So that was pre-Facebook. And like, I remember the top 5 friends that you had on your profile.
It was so important.
That defined who your friends were in high school or in middle school. Like, if you weren't in the top 5, that's game changer. Like, you're in trouble. Your friend doesn't like you anymore. And I remember friendships like dissolving because of that. But that's just how it was. And obviously, you see platforms trying to change that mentality of like, oh, we're no longer going to show like that particular thing, and we're going to take away from like, Instagram hiding likes if you want to hide likes and stuff like that. But, that's just stuff that just not going to get into because I have a pretty strong opinion on it. I think you do as well.
Yeah.
And let's just say that it's really close to being deleted and never used again, just because
Yeah.
I just want to disconnect. But I will say that it is a good thing for the older generation of the fraternity to connect, and obviously like family and maybe some friends that you don't really particularly see often, like if they live out of state or whatever the case may be. But yeah, social media is just not a good thing. It's just not.
Nope.
And that's all I'm gonna say about it.
For personal things, I guess. But like I guess for business type of things, it's good because you're getting your presence out there.
Yeah,
For small people, right? You're creating your content.
Yeah.
And people like me.
Promotion, things
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, personally, no, I'm good. I'm good on that. Yeah, and that was the thing. Like finding out that Cameron wanted to do this podcast, and he wanted to actually turn it into something that was continuous and that he would do for a long time. Listening to the pilot and listening to a couple of the other episodes, like I was like, hey man, I just reached out to him. I was like, can I jump on board? Like, I want to give you some content. Like, it at least push you forward for the next week. And I'm all for, promoting friends and small businesses and things like that. Like, I think that we need more of it. And I think that, hopefully this turns out to a long-term project for you, because I know you enjoy it. And I also enjoy being on the podcast. Like, this is great. There's a lot of things that I skipped on talking about, particular details, that maybe could potentially leave for another episode down the road. Stuff that I would dive into on more of like an individual detail level with college, like certain relationships, and not necessarily anything negative, but more so on like, hey, funny story, this happened and this is why, and this was the outcome, like that sort of stuff. So nothing negative, but I wanted to keep some back just to ensure, like, hey, if you ever need another one, I got you.
I've thought about trying to get into doing that with people. Like, let's do one like this, and then let's like sit down and really dive deep into like some stories and talk about things and like understand what shapes you as you and these high impact stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of like the defining things for me, I just wanted to touch on. And obviously we could always go into detail, but I think the main premise is like, if you don't know me and you listen to this podcast, you can kind of get a general understanding, but you still don't really know who I am. So those key details, like those small things that kind of add up to give you the whole picture, the holistic picture, those are what's important. So like you can get the base overview, like, hey, you may decide you don't like me just based off of this podcast, this one episode.
That's
but
fine.
then
They probably won't even meet you.
Well, that's fine. Absolutely. But then you could listen to like, okay, well, this is the reason why this was the defining moment. And here are key details that I kind of left out.
Mm-hmm.
And that may change your perspective. But you always have to be open to that. And if you're not, then I don't care. You're not going to hurt my feelings. And I'm sure Cameron doesn't care either. So,
man, I got my first piece of hate mail the other day. And I literally like woke up, turned my alarm off, and saw that was the first thing I saw when I woke up. So it like sets the mood for the day, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I've gotten a lot of love and support on this so far, and just a random person sent me the shittiest DM.
What did it say? I gotta know.
I'll tell you afterwards.
Oh man, is it that bad?
It's not that bad, but it's annoying.
Okay.
But like I read it, and I was like, I sat and I took a step back, and I was like, am I gonna let this ruin my day? And it's like a fucking Wednesday. Like it's I gotta work in like an hour.
Who sends hate mail on a Wednesday? Like, who are you?
And it was also a Wednesday at like 2 a.m. too, so it wasn't like,
you're the worst.
Yeah,
I want you to know.
Yeah, I saw it. I'm like, is this gonna ruin my day? And I just hit block, and I just got up.
Yeah,
I
mean, you can't let other people define like what deems you successful is that you feel like you've reached the level of success that you want, right? So like, regardless if someone doesn't like what you're doing, you're never gonna please everybody.
Right. billions of people in the world. No one,
Yeah.
there's gonna be a hater.
You think I give a shit? You're 1 out of 7 some billion people. You think I give a shit?
Yeah.
Hell no. Like, hey, you might hurt my feelings. I might be a little upset about it. But then I'm just gonna be like, all right, cool story,
Yeah.
bro. Like, move on with my life. I ain't worried about it. And that's the way I've looked at life. Like, I've made some poor decisions. I've made bad decisions. Nothing that I regret. I would say that I've never regretted a decision, but ultimately it's been, a lesson that I've learned.
Right.
Some good lessons, some bad lessons. But, if I upset you, I'll apologize. But if I feel like I was in the right and you can't like, give your opinion and show the reason why I was wrong in that situation, then we're just going to leave it at that. And I'm going to keep continuing feeling the way that I feel, and you're going to keep continuing the way you feel. And there's not going to be a difference. So just don't waste your energy, because I definitely won't waste my energy. But yeah, it's crazy to think like, this is relatively new venture, and, and I'm sure it won't be the only time that somebody says something negatively towards this or to an individual on the podcast. I don't think that you should definitely don't let that like change your outlook on it. I don't want you to like stop doing it because someone's like, hey, you guys sound like a bunch of idiots. Fuck you. Like, cool story, bro. Like, let's see you do it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Where's your platform? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Besides typing out a paragraph of the reason why this sucks, or you hate it, or this guy's an idiot. Like, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. This isn't about me. This is about who I have here.
Yeah.
Right. This is you telling your story.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Give me the hate, I guess, but don't hate on someone telling their story.
Yeah.
It's their life. It's how they've lived it. All right. You may have a different perspective. Fuck off. I don't know. If you're going to be mean about it, like, just fuck off.
One thing that I would say is just eat shit and die, pussy. That's always the canned response of like, oh, whatever, you hate me, blah, 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 you don't want to see me succeed. Eat shit and die, pussy. Like, I don't care. It's not that big of a deal to me. I'll just move on and continue doing what I want to do with my life. Right. And trying to find the path that I think is going to be the most successful for what I want and the objectives that I want to complete in my lifetime. But enough about that. Let's kind of like, I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but let's kind of wrap up. I've got one big thing that I want to talk about.
Yeah, we can wrap up here, but I know that we only stopped at your college life.
I have so much more.
We can do another one.
Absolutely. I have so much more. And
we got a second Taren coming in.
Oh.
Second episode for Taren coming in hot sometime.
Part 2.
But yeah, what do you want to mention? What's the big thing?
So the big thing that I want to drop on the very last minute of this podcast, and I like I said, I apologize for the time. I'm sure that it's well over 2 hours. But so something that recently happened to me is I went through a mental health crisis. I didn't talk about this to anybody openly. My mom knows, and my ex-girlfriend knows that back in June of this year, I contemplated committing suicide. So my grandmother passed away in May, and I had some pretty large life changes after that. As I said in the beginning of the podcast, my grandmother was like a second parent to me. And I kind of had a mental breakdown one night. I realized that she was dying, and there wasn't anything that anyone could do. She was placed on hospice, passed away, and then I remember sitting on my couch at like 2 a.m. Couldn't sleep, sick, anxiety-ridden. Like, I was just in a really bad spot, and I didn't feel like I had anyone to reach out to because, one, everybody's asleep at 2 a.m, right? And the decision to go for a drive normally is kind of how I help calm myself down if I'm having issues with like anxiety or something like that. But this time it didn't help. So I live in Pataskala, and I kind of just got on the highway and started driving, and I made it to Delaware, Ohio, which is about a 40-minute drive from my place, considering the roads and stuff that I took. And in the back of my head, I was literally driving, just bawling my eyes out, just absolutely losing everything. Uh, was just lost in the moment, and like I couldn't think of any other way to like stop the pain, stop all the bad thoughts. I mean, it was really crazy to me, like going through that, because I struggled with anxiety and stuff growing up, and it's just kind of a part of like who I am. And I never really thought I needed professional help, or really thought that it was like, oh, like, like I didn't show it on the outside, so not a whole lot of people knew that I had issues. But I wanted to talk about it here because, like, if I wouldn't have stopped in the parking lot that I stopped in and called the suicide hotline, I probably wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast. And it's really difficult to talk about, especially on an open air like this where anybody could listen to. But I want to, because it just kind of made me realize, like, people suffer in silence for so long, and then when they hit their breaking point, nobody knows until either something negative happens or eventually they talk about it. And for me, like I said, there's two people that knew about this. I spent the night in the hospital, so I called the it's actually the veteran suicide hotline, just because I always went through like that in the training, and like that was always the number that I always knew to call, like if anything ever bad happened. So I don't know why, but I stopped in a parking lot. I didn't even park in a parking space. I just parked in like multiple spaces, just like long ways. I called. I was bawling my eyes out. Like they asked, am I safe? Am I in a safe place? They asked me if I was contemplating committing suicide and stuff like that. And I told them, and as hard as it was for me to admit it to just a random stranger on the phone, I told them yes. I said, I am moments away from doing something that would cause myself harm. And I remember the lady asking me if she wanted to call the police, to have them show up to do like a welfare check. And I kind of remember just being silent and just not saying anything. And then after 20, 30 seconds, I was like, yes, please, because I don't know if I can be by myself any longer. The only reason why it stopped me is because I was talking to someone. Like, at that level of like, I don't even call it sadness. I wouldn't even consider it sadness. I was so numb. I was so upset that it just like, it didn't bother me. And then when Delaware police showed up, it was kind of like a traffic stop, but I feel like it was obviously for their safety. Well, you run my tag, and I have a concealed carry license. Like I have, for the state of Ohio, I have that. So, they want to make sure that I'm not going to harm them. Mental health crises are a large part and reason why like bad things happen during traffic stops. Like there's been plenty of videos on the internet where, veterans, non-veterans, civilians, doesn't matter who you are. If you have a gun and you're contemplating committing suicide, you're going to do something if you want to, that will continue that, suicide by cop or killing yourself in front of the people that show up. So they got me out of the truck. And knowing, from school and stuff, and doing some of like the police like pre-training and stuff like that, because I wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to make sure that they knew that I wasn't armed. I didn't bring my gun with me. So they obviously just checked real quick, and they checked me, and they started having just a normal conversation with me. They were asking me like, hey, what's going on? I told them, I was like, I was contemplating committing suicide until I stopped in this parking lot and called the suicide helpline, and they called you to show up. I said literally, like I was seconds away. So I had planned on literally just driving. At the time I had a truck, I had a brand new Silverado. I was just going to take my seatbelt off and drive it into the bridge for the overpass that was off of Route 42 in Delaware, because they're massive concrete beams, and there's no way that like I would have survived that. And that was what I was planning on doing. That was the end point. At least that's what I thought the end point was. And I'm thankful for the officer that was talking to me. He was a younger guy, probably only a few years older than me. Um, and he started asking me questions about family. He asked me about siblings. He asked me about all these questions. And that was kind of like the moment I realized, like, it's not selfish. Like, it's never a selfish thought to contemplate suicide, because you want to stop yourself from hurting, but you also don't want to stop. You don't want other people to feel that same hurt, right? So, like, I understand it may seem selfish because you're taking your life, but you have to be pushed past a point to where you actually think about it. And I know that you were affected by it and your family, and it's a really difficult topic to talk about because, one, mental health, it doesn't come up very often. It's more so now in the last couple of years, but before then, I think it's 70% people. So out of 100%, 70% are men who commit suicide. Men deal with a lot of issues when it comes to that because one, most of us are stubborn. We don't want to reach out for help because it's seen as a sign of weakness. And that's just kind of, the negative limelight of how we were, taught growing up, like, be a man, don't show your feelings, don't cry. Like, you always got to, like, kind of suffer in silence. And that's what I did for so long with just everything going on in my life, some previous issues with traumas and stuff like that I thought that was the only way out. And I'm obviously very thankful that I didn't follow through with that action. I'm glad for the police officers that showed up that day. They drove me to the hospital, to Delaware's hospital up there, and they checked me in. Basically, if anyone's ever been through a mental health crisis and they went to the hospital, they know that they strip you of all your clothes, your phone. They take everything from you and make you wear, like, safety socks and a gown, and you're just laying in a bed by yourself with the door closed. And they have like a camera in the corner to obviously make sure that you don't do anything while you're there. And like I said, it's probably around 3 or 4 in the morning. So nobody knew at all that this was going on. And something that really bothered me is the first doctor that was there for the night shift came in and had a conversation with me. And he's like, I don't think you're under the influence of any drugs or alcohol. And I told him I wasn't. This is 100% sober. Like, there was nothing mentally changing the way that I was thinking or talking. I said, this is just me, just a really low spot. But the first shift doctor came in and ordered a drug and toxicology screen because he thought I was lying. And I don't want anyone to ever feel like they have to prove themselves. Like, okay, if you are under the influence of something, like, it's understandable. But for a doctor to sit there and require me to go through that after I told them, not only him, but the doctor before him, and the doctor before him even was like, I think that you are mentally sound. Like, you're not, on drugs, you're not drunk, it just really, like, that bothered me. That really bothered me. And I hope that nobody has to go through that. But I know that that's just how it is in the medical field. Like, if they can't prove that it's, the influence of, outside substances, then they're like, oh, okay, well, then it truly is a mental health issue. So I wasn't really a big fan of that. That really bothered me. The nurses they never questioned anything. They were super nice and helpful. But that same doctor in the discharge notes basically said that I wasn't as bad as some of the other cases. In medical terms, like, that's basically how he wrote it out. And I'm like, you don't know that. Like, just because I don't show typical symptoms or signs, that doesn't mean that when I leave here, that I might go do something. And I had conversations with the nurses and the doctors. They have to talk to you, and they have to, figure out what's causing the issues, and basically kind of give you, like, a generalized diagnosis of, like, okay, yes, today you were showing signs of, depression and generalized anxiety. But, like, that whole experience was not a good experience. I'm glad that I went, because I don't know what would have happened if I didn't make that phone call or if that police officer didn't take me to the hospital. But it just kind of really opened my eyes to like there needs to be some sort of reform too in the medical field. And I understand that, a general hospital isn't, one for mental health crisis, but you should be able to at least rely to get some sort of like help, some sort of like emotional help and mental help and, maybe some clarity. But it just seemed like, yep. Are you intoxicated? No. Okay. Well, we're going to discharge you. We think you're okay now. Like, you didn't run blood tests. You didn't check to see if anything else, there was anything else pre-existing that was affecting those thoughts. They didn't do anything. And the hardest part about all of this isn't that experience. It was, at 8:30 in the morning, who can we call to have them come pick you up? And I laid there and I'm like, I don't want anyone to know. Like, this is not embarrassing, but it's just like one of those things where, again, be a man, don't be emotional. Like, my first initial response was, I don't know. And they said, okay, well, we'll give you your phone back so that way you can, look through your contacts to see if there's anyone that you can call. And fortunately, of course, my girlfriend at the time, ex-girlfriend now, was at home, and she was able to come pick me up. But seeing the reaction and the response from her, because she obviously didn't know, the nurses had to tell her what happened, was kind of devastating for me, because like that emotional response of, she felt like she failed me, but really ultimately she didn't know, so I didn't tell her. I didn't show signs like they always say, like, normally, like, oh, if they show withdrawal or they show this, that's not the case all the time. For me, I didn't withdraw from anything. I still tried to put on the smile. I still tried to be myself. And then at the end of the day, it was just break down, and to the point where I thought that was the only option left, is like, I just don't want to be around anymore. And like I said, I'm lucky that I made the right decision and made that phone call and got some help, which I haven't sought therapy afterwards, which I should. I'm just such a procrastinator when it comes to that. And that's a part of the problem, is like, hey, like, I should really focus on that. And looking forward, that's something that I'm going to take very seriously, kind of coming out of a situation where it's going to be very important to make sure that I take care of myself, not only physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. But that was kind of the big bomb that I wanted to drop, because, like I said, not a whole lot of people see that. They view me as the always joking, always laughing, always smiling person. But on the backside of that, there's always emotion that don't get shown. So,
yeah, man, I'm so happy that you shared that story, and I'm so sad that you had to go through that. I'm happy that you shared it, in a recorded fashion to where people can listen to it and realize, they're not alone, that it happens. It's not just you, or, it does happen and they're blind to it. Right.
Yeah.
I'm sad that you have to go through that, because it's hard to go through. Right. Yeah. Like, mental health is such a big thing in everyone's life. Right. That's why I'm loud about it on social media. That's the one thing I'm loud about. That and posting this.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I'm so glad that you called. You can call me. I would have been asleep, but you could have called me.
There would have been no help.
I'd fucking wake up and drive up there. Don't you worry.
I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you're still here today. And I know I want you to take care of yourself. And if there's anything that I can do to help you, I'm always here for you.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about that?
No, man. If the only thing that I will say is, if you ever feel like you're going through it alone, it's because you make it so. There'll always be somebody out there that will listen to your story and listen to what makes you upset. Like Cameron just said, you know, I could have called him, but in the moment when you're going through it, you don't necessarily think that way. And
Right.
I know I didn't.
Yeah.
But
I don't expect you to think, oh, I'm going to call Cameron right now.
Sure.
But, you know, I got to be there for you and say, you can call me.
Absolutely.
And I'm not just saying that to say that. I do deeply mean it.
Oh, absolutely. And I genuinely believe you as well. So,
yeah.
I think it's just having those conversations, and they're really hard to have. Like, the military was so, they were so bad about it because it's just like the military just doesn't understand. We had what's called, at the time it was called an ACE card, which is Ask, Care, Escort. So basically, like, I remember the card was like a poker card. Like, it was just a regular playing card. And on the ask, it's ask if the person is feeling suicidal. And I'm like, I've never felt comfortable in a setting to be like, hey, Cameron, are you feeling suicidal? That's never come to my mind. So, like, that blew my mind that was like the military approach to it. You know, there's ways that you can have the conversation and get the answer, the response that will elicit that, you know, the question, the way that the question's worded, it will elicit the response if that's the way that they're feeling. But sometimes people won't tell you, and you can't expect them to tell you. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows and is aware, like, you should tell people. Going through it alone is the absolute worst, especially if you don't have like an actual diagnosis, you're not actually going to therapy, you don't actually take antidepressants. Like, that is the worst route to go down, because you can make the mistake of actually following through. And, you know, I almost made that mistake. Luckily, you know, for whatever reason, the last minute, the decision was just make the phone call. But, you know, ask questions that will elicit the response. If you think an individual is going through something, and if they don't want to talk to you, still continuously follow up. And it doesn't have to particularly be on that topic, but just follow up and check in on them. Check in on them and make sure that they're okay, because, like, you know, we all have bad days. Some of us may have longer than bad days. Some would be a week or a month or whatever. But as long as you're there and you create that support network for somebody, I think that's what matters. I don't think you could ever look back and say, I failed somebody if you were there the entire time. Because ultimately, like, someone's going to make a decision whether you like it or not. So regardless of the outcome of the situation, like, as long as you were there and you put forth the effort, never take it negatively, regardless of the outcome. I want to make sure that that's out there too, because that was one of my worries, is like, what if I just failed to stop something from happening? Well, ultimately that wasn't my decision. Like, I tried, I gave them the support. You know, I asked them, like, hey, do you want to go to the hospital? Hey, do you want to go together to get therapy? Like, you know, I've been in a situation very similar to that, where it's like, you know, hey, I was vocal about it. Hey, I think you should go to therapy. Like, we should seek professional help, because the issue that, you know, you're going through, I can't help you with. I don't have that level of knowledge to be like, hey, you know, okay, I'm identifying this behavior as something that's causing you to be upset, or, you know, causing anxiety, depression, whatever. Where someone that went to school for it and has that, you know, experience may be able to be like, hey, I see this common factor. This is what you should try to change, and here's ways that you can change for the positive. But that's really what I wanted to end off with, and kind of the caveat to it as well, is just always try to be there, especially for friends. And like I said, you may never know. Like, Cameron didn't know. Like, Cameron had no idea, and this
Zero
is
idea.
6 or 7 months down the road that I actually, you know, talk about it with him and in this setting. Even though we had dinner before this, I told him, I was like, hey, I've got a bomb I want to drop on you during the podcast, and this is that bomb. So he didn't know until this moment, and there's no fault to Cameron. I mean, obviously I didn't say anything, and we've talked before, you know, before it happened, after it's happened, like, you know, we've had conversations between each other. So that's why it's important to kind of open up and tell people that you care about as well.
You never know what battle someone is facing.
Absolutely.
You never know. So always be kind.
Yep, always. And that's the way that I've approached life, and that's why I talked about it so much in the beginning, is like, I'm friends with everybody. I don't
Yeah.
feel like you can't be my friend just because I dress a certain way or I look a certain way. 'Cause that's never the case.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always ask a question at the end, and I feel like that's probably going to be the advice that you give. But what is that one piece of advice that you want to live on, as you know what Taren said?
Well, so I could be corny and be like, yeah, exactly what I just said. But I will say this. I would say my piece of advice is never stop yourself from doing something that you might enjoy. And I'm talking particularly new experiences. So I've done that. I've stopped myself from new experiences, and I've kind of looked back and been like, shit, I should have taken that opportunity, because you never know what may come of it. Whether it's good or bad, it's either a lesson or it's you enjoying whatever that particular situation is. But that's my last piece of advice.
I love it. Love it. Thank you so much for coming out and sharing just one piece of your story.
Yes.
You're coming back for another episode.
Part 2 coming soon.
I love it. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming out, sharing your story. I really appreciate it. I love hanging out, and this was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you having me on, and I do look forward to doing another episode with you as well.
Awesome. I do as well. So until next time, I'll see you.
We'll see you, sir.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Fatal to Prejudice. If you or anyone you know would like to be a guest, please visit my website at CameronChats.com and fill out the Contact Me form. Please fill out the subject line as podcast interview and write me a small blurb on why you or someone you know should be a guest. I'll leave a link in the description for ease of access. You can support this podcast by listening to it on your favorite podcasting site. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Another way to support is by becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/Fatal to Prejudice. Patreon is the only monetary support system. If you would like to sign up and support through there, I am forever grateful for you. Again, thank you for tuning in.